The alignment of the Sun and Saturn within the same astrological house or degree, known as a Sun-Saturn conjunction, is universally recognized across both Western and Vedic astrological traditions as one of the most complex, heavy, and profound placements a person can carry in their natal chart. Archetypally, this alignment brings together two fundamentally opposing forces: the Sun, which represents vitality, the ego, the individual soul, and the desire to radiantly express oneself, and Saturn, which represents structure, restriction, time, karma, and the immovable boundaries of reality. When these two cosmic forces collide, the psychological and destiny-driven landscape of the individual becomes an arena of intense friction, early hardship, and eventual mastery. To understand the core tension of this conjunction, one must first look at the relationship between the two celestial bodies. In classical mythology and Vedic lore, the Sun and Saturn are viewed as bitter enemies, often cast in the dynamic of a distant, demanding father and an alienated son. The Sun is pure light, heat, and immediate visibility. Saturn is cold, dark, and requires slow, agonizing time to build. Psychologically, when Saturn sits next to the Sun, it casts a shadow directly over the native sense of self and personal confidence. From a young age, individuals born under this conjunction often feel an omnipresent sense of restriction or a weight that they cannot easily shake off. It is as if their natural right to shine, play, and express joy was met with strict rules, heavy responsibilities, or a critical environment before they were mature enough to handle them. This sense of restriction almost always manifests through the archetype of the father or early authority figures. The child with a Sun-Saturn conjunction frequently experiences their father as emotionally distant, physically absent, overly critical, or burdened by his own heavy trials. Approval is rarely given freely; it must be earned through perfection, obedience, or achievements. This creates a deeply ingrained psychological blueprint wherein the individual equates their personal worth entirely with their utility, productivity, and ability to endure hardship. They develop a hyper-responsible inner critic that constantly monitors their actions, leading to profound bouts of self-doubt, imposter syndrome, and a pervasive fear of failure or public humiliation. In early life, this can make the native appear shy, introverted, serious beyond their years, or chronically underconfident. Astronomically and astrologically, this relationship is further complicated by the concept of combustion. When Saturn comes within roughly 15 degrees of the Sun, it enters the solar rays so deeply that it becomes invisible to the human eye from Earth, effectively being burnt up by the Sun's heat. In the case of Saturn, combustion creates a highly paradoxical state. While Saturn's external structures might feel oppressive, its constructive qualities, such as healthy boundaries, patience, and realistic planning, can become warped or hidden. The native might swing between extremes of intense overwork, trying desperately to prove their value to the world, and sudden bouts of paralysis or procrastination caused by the sheer dread that their efforts will never be good enough. They may feel invisible to the world, struggling for decades to receive the recognition, promotions, or validation that others seem to attain with minimal effort. However, viewing the Sun-Saturn conjunction purely as a cosmic curse misses the entire evolutionary purpose of the alignment. Saturn is the planet of time and maturity, and its harshest lessons are always front-loaded. As the individual ages, particularly after their first Saturn return around the age of 29 to 30, a profound internal alchemy begins to take place. The constant pressure that once threatened to crush the ego begins instead to compress it into something diamond-hard and unbreakable. The native gradually realizes that seeking external approval, whether from a father, an employer, or society, is a futile endeavor. They are forced to build their own internal scaffolding. Through decades of enduring delays, facing limitations, and working methodically, the Sun-Saturn individual develops a rare kind of resilience, humility, and unshakable self-reliance. The unearned, fragile ego of youth is replaced by an authentic authority that has been tested in the fires of reality. They become the classic late bloomers of the zodiac. When success, leadership, or public recognition finally arrives in the later chapters of life, it is permanent and deeply respected because it was built on a foundation of genuine grit, integrity, and exhaustive effort. The ultimate gift of the Sun-Saturn conjunction is the transformation of a heavily burdened child into a wise, disciplined master of their own destiny, possessing a quiet strength that no external storm can diminish. Continuing deeper into the psychological and karmic architecture of the Sun-Saturn conjunction, we find that its influence operates like an invisible gravity well, pulling the individual towards situations that test the absolute limits of human endurance. While the initial phases of this alignment bring vulnerability and constraint, the middle and later chapters of life reveal it to be a profound mechanism for soul forging. To fully comprehend this placement, one must look beyond the basic father-son dynamic and examine how it warps the perception of time, how it manifests in physical vitality, and how it ultimately demands a total restructuring of the human ego. A defining characteristic of the Sun-Saturn individual is an altered, often heavy relationship with time itself. Saturn, as Chronos, rules the ticking clock, the aging process, and the structural limits of physical reality. When it fuses with the Sun, the source of life and light, time becomes a source of ambient anxiety. From a young age, these individuals feel as though they are running out of time, yet they are simultaneously subjected to agonizing delays. They watch peers advance rapidly in careers, relationships, and social standing, while their own path remains blocked by bureaucratic hurdles, family obligations, or sudden, unprovoked setbacks. This creates an internal landscape of chronic frustration. The native feels like a high-performance engine trapped inside a cage of concrete. However, this agonizingly slow pace is intentional. Saturn refuses to let the native build their life on sand. Every step forward must be anchored into solid rock, which requires time, repetition, and the painful clearing away of illusions. This internal friction frequently takes a toll on the native's physical vitality and health. The Sun governs the heart, the spine, the eyes, and the overall pranic energy or life force flowing through the body. Saturn represents calcification, coldness, depletion, and the skeletal system. When Saturn conjoins the Sun, it can physically drain the native's battery. In youth, this often manifests as low energy, poor circulation, or a fragile constitution that requires careful maintenance. The individual cannot simply abuse their body with sleepless nights and poor nutrition the way others might. Saturn exacts an immediate toll. Furthermore, the psychological weight of carrying unexpressed anger and suppressed grief can manifest as physical tension, particularly in the back, joints, and bones. As these individuals age, however, a strange reversal often occurs. Because they were forced to learn discipline, pacing, and somatic boundaries early in life, they frequently become healthier, hardier, and more resilient in their later years than those who burned through their youthful vitality carelessly. On a purely psychological level, the Sun-Saturn conjunction creates a highly complex defense mechanism known as hyper-independence. Because the native learned early on that external authorities were unreliable, critical, or emotionally withholding, they develop a profound reluctance to ask for help. Asking for assistance feels, to them, like an admission of weakness or an invitation for further rejection. They become the archetypal lone wolves, absorbing massive amounts of stress, taking on the workloads of entire teams, and silently carrying the emotional burdens of their families without ever uttering a complaint. While this makes them incredibly dependable pillars of their communities, it also traps them in a prison of isolation. The profound loneliness of a Sun-Saturn individual does not stem from a lack of people around them, but from their own refusal to let anyone see them vulnerable, flawed, or resting. The evolutionary turning point of this conjunction always involves the ego's willing surrender to a higher, more collective duty. In the early stages of life, the ego fights Saturn. It demands to be seen, it throws tantrums over the unfairness of its limitations, and it tries to force its way through closed doors using raw willpower. This approach always results in burnout and crushing defeats. Saturn cannot be bullied, bypassed, or outrun. The magic of this placement only unlocks when the native stops viewing Saturn as an enemy and begins to view it as a strict guru. The individual must shift their motivation from "look at me, see how great I am," the distorted solar ego, to "how can I be of service, and what is my actual duty?" The refined Saturnian ideal. When the native shifts their focus to mastery of craft, ethical integrity, and the patient building of structures that benefit others, the cosmic weight lifts. They stop craving the applause of the crowd because they have developed an internal metric of validation that no one can touch. They become comfortable with obscurity, knowing that true quality speaks for itself over time. This is why Sun-Saturn individuals make unparalleled leaders, judges, mentors, and executives in their later years. They do not abuse power because they know exactly how much power hurts. They do not mock the struggling because they remember every step of the dark valley they had to climb. Ultimately, the Sun-Saturn conjunction is a contract written by the soul before birth, a choice to opt out of an easy, superficial lifetime in favor of a heavy, monumental one. It demands that the individual become their own father, their own protector, and their own source of light. When a person with this placement finally stands in their full authority at 50, 60, or 70 years old, they possess a quiet, monolithic dignity. They are proof that while the sun can be eclipsed by darkness for a time, the light that emerges from behind Saturn's rings is tempered, unbreakable, and capable of illuminating the way for generations to come. Subscribe, like, and share.